Tonight, when the sun goes down, you are going to flip a switch. Light will flood the room and you will not think twice about it. But for 99.9% of human history, that switch did not exist. When the sun set, the world went dark. And what happened inside that darkness shaped everything you are. You think of night as dead time, the gap between one productive day and the next. Something to sleep through. But your ancestors did not see it that way. They could not afford to. Night was not empty. Night was the most important part of the day. The question is, what were they actually doing in it? Researchers had assumed for decades that prehistoric humans simply slept when the sun went down. It seemed logical. Without artificial light, what else could you do? Jerome Siegel, an anthropologist at UCLA, decided to actually test that assumption. He spent years studying 3 hunter-gatherer groups living today without electricity: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. What he found destroyed the theory entirely. They did not go to sleep at sunset, not even close. On average, these groups stayed awake for 3 to 4 hours after darkness fell. They sat around fires, they talked, they told stories, they performed rituals. They did not collapse into sleep the moment light disappeared. They gathered and they stayed together, and they used the night deliberately. That finding is more important than it sounds, because it means that night, for almost all of human history, was social time, protected time, a window carved out by darkness where the rules of the day did not apply. Think about what the day demanded of your ancestors. It was relentless: foraging, tracking, watching for predators, managing the group. Every hour of daylight carried real stakes. A wrong decision could mean starvation. A lapse in attention could mean death. The day was a performance. Night was different. The predators that hunted humans mostly moved at dawn and dusk. Deep darkness, especially near a fire, was actually safer than twilight. And so the social architecture of human life shifted after sunset. The urgency dropped. The pretense fell away. And what filled that space was something researchers were not expecting: stories. Polly Weissner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, conducted a study comparing what Jew Hoanzi Bushmen in the Kalahari talked about during the day versus what they talked about at night. The difference was stark. Daytime conversation was almost entirely practical. Tasks, resources, complaints about each other. The social maintenance of a small group trying to survive. But nighttime conversation was almost entirely narrative. They told stories about distant places, about people who were not there, about hunts that had happened years ago, about spirits and ancestors and the way the world came to be. The campfire was not just a source of heat. It was the world's first theater. And this matters for understanding who you are, because storytelling at night is not a luxury your ancestors stumbled into. It is the engine that built your mind. When you sit in a dark room and someone tells you a story, something changes in your brain. The neural coupling that Yuri Hassan at Princeton has documented, where the listener's brain activity starts to mirror the storyteller's brain activity, is more powerful in low-light conditions. Your visual cortex quiets down. Your imagination activates. You are more suggestible, more emotionally open, more able to simulate another person's experience. Darkness made your ancestors better at empathy, not metaphorically, neurologically. The campfire created the conditions for humans to understand each other in ways that daylight simply could not replicate. It is why your best conversations still happen late at night. It is why you feel closer to people after sitting around a fire. The biology is ancient. The feeling is not nostalgia. It is recognition. But storytelling was only one piece of what happened in the dark. Night was also when knowledge transferred. David Lewis Williams, an archaeologist at the University of the Witwatersrand, spent decades studying the cave paintings of ancient humans, and one of his central arguments is that the most significant images, the ones painted deep in cave systems, far from daylight, were made in altered states, in darkness, in firelight, in the threshold between waking and something else. The paintings are not random decoration. They are maps of an interior world, animals transforming into humans, figures half submerged in rock. abstract patterns that match what the human nervous system generates when consciousness shifts. They were not made to be seen in the ordinary sense. They were made to be experienced. This is what deep night offered your ancestors: access to the parts of the mind that could not surface during the day. The visions, the archetypes, the encounters with something that felt larger than the self. Your brain, without light, does not simply rest. It begins to produce its own imagery. Hypnagogic hallucinations, the visions that appear at the boundary of sleep, are not glitches. They are a feature, a deliberate threshold built into human neurology. And for most of human history, people moved through that threshold communally. What one person saw, they described. What one person dreamed, the group interpreted. Night was not dead time. Night was the laboratory of the inner life. And then there is sleep itself. Because even the way your ancestors slept was nothing like what you do now. Roger E. Kirch, a historian at Virginia Tech, spent 16 years combing through pre-industrial historical records and found overwhelming evidence that humans did not sleep in one continuous block. They slept in two separate phases. The first sleep lasted roughly 4 hours. Then people woke. They lay in the dark for an hour or two. And then they slept again. This waking period in the middle of the night was not insomnia. It was expected. Normal. People used it. They prayed. They had sex. They checked on their children. They thought through problems. Some got up and visited neighbors. Medieval Europeans called it the watch or the dorvel, and medical texts of the era described it as a time of unusual mental clarity. What you call insomnia? Lying awake in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced something is wrong. Maybe your body remembering what it was designed to do. The anxiety you feel in that window is not your biology failing you. It is your biology reaching for a ritual that modernity abolished. You live under artificial light. You compress your sleep into a single block. You treat wakefulness at 3 a.m. as a malfunction. But your ancestors sat up in that darkness and thought their clearest thoughts of the day. The fire did one more thing, and this might be the most important of all. It equalized the group. Christopher Boehm, an anthropologist at the University of Southern California, has argued that human egalitarianism, the unusual tendency of hunter-gatherer groups to resist domination and flatten hierarchy, depended in large part on the campfire. Around the fire at night, everyone was visible, and no one had an advantage. The strongest hunter could not simply take what he wanted in the dark, surrounded by witnesses. The firelight created accountability. It made secret aggression impossible. The political structure of early human society was literally built around the campfire's glow. And it held. For hundreds of thousands of years, the campfire was the center of human social life. It was the parliament, the classroom, the temple, and the therapy room. Every significant thing that made humans human, language, empathy, storytelling, shared belief, egalitarian politics, was forged in the hours after sunset, around a small circle of light in a very large darkness. Then, in 1879, Thomas Edison turned on the bulb, and the night disappeared. Not suddenly, but steadily, decade by decade, the darkness shrank. The television replaced the fire. The single long sleep replaced the two-phase watch. The algorithm replaced the story. The screen replaced the dark. And now you flip a switch when the sun goes down. Light floods the room. You do not think twice about it. But somewhere in the back of your mind, in the part that still runs on ancient code, you know what used to happen here. That inexplicable pull toward firelight on a camping trip. The way late-night conversations feel different from all the others. The stories you tell yourself in the dark when you cannot sleep at 3 a.m. That is not a glitch. That is memory. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you are going to flip a switch. But you have always known, without knowing why, that the dark was not something to be afraid of. It was something to gather around.